The main thing that Arsenal fans have been talking about this summer is Arsenal's need for another forward. And with the transfers of Ricardo Calafiori and now hopefully Mikel Merino, these questions still have not been answered. And with a week and a half left of the transfer window, Arsenal's opportunity to sign any of these forwards is becoming slimmer by the day. But with recent sales to the team and Mikel Arteta reportedly wanting a new forward in, I still think it is very likely Arsenal make another signing this summer. So I've put together this video where I go through every single player I could potentially see joining Arsenal or the fans want to join in the forward position, so we can determine who would be the best fit for the club to help them win the league this season. With that being said, let's get into it. Now in this video there's going to be a lot of players that we go through, and some of them we're going to go in more detail than others because I've done lots of videos on some of the players that we're going to briefly mention. Also some players that I think are more unrealistic I won't be talking about too much, but we'll mention them in this video of course anyway. To make this thing easier, I have got every single player and put them in one of 4 categories to determine if they are likely to sign or the money that Arsenal will spend. And then 4 categories are if it's a cheaper option, these are players that are going to cost around less than 30 mil in my opinion, or potentially a loan signing. Then you've got market opportunities, these are people around 30 to 50 mil but could be cheaper or more expensive depending on their current situation at the club. We've got big transfer realistic, which is someone that would cost over £50 million, but I could definitely see Arsenal go out and buy him this summer and could see them also wanting to come to the club. And the last category is unrealistic, players that I don't think Arsenal could be able to convince this summer to join, or players that I don't think are really gettable with the amount of fee that Arsenal would have to pay this year. Now first of all, looking at the cheaper options Arsenal could sign, there is a few players that I have come up with. Now these kind of overlap with the market opportunities depending on the situation that is at a club, and a lot of the players in these 2 categories you could probably put in either or depending on the price they're going to cost, because I think some market opportunities are still going to cost quite a lot of money to be able to get in. First player we're going to go through is Kingsley Coman. Obviously been at Bayern Munich now for a few years, scoring the winning goal in the Champions League in 2020, and he's a player that is very versatile, being able to play on both wings quite easily. He's right footed so he probably prefers the left, but has definitely played to the right an even amount as he did last season. Now the advantages of getting this player in is definitely the situation that is at hand. Bayern Munich have been trying to sign wingers or midfielders at least all summer, and it has been quite clear that they've been trying to get rid of one of the players that they have in that position, and Coman seems to be the one that they really want to get rid of, reportedly transfer listed and even listing him on loan. And Coman is a good player. He's very good at getting the ball from deep and dragging his team up the pitch. He loves playing in space, which obviously he probably gets more at Bayern Munich in the Bundesliga than he would at Arsenal, but he's very good at taking people on dribbles and carrying the ball and making quite good progressive passes at 5.4 per game, which definitely make him a useful winger if you wanted to sign him. He not only could be a versatile option, he also could bring something a little bit different, being able to actually play deeper than some of our wingers and progress the ball, especially on that left side where I think he probably would play the best. And he is a very electric player, got really good acceleration and can get in behind. And although he necessarily hasn't been the most prolific person for output in the last few years, his underlying numbers aren't actually that bad at 0.3 non-penalty goals and around 0.5 non-penalty expected goals and expected assists per 90, so that's a good enough level I would say. However, there is still a lot of negatives with this player. He is 28, so he isn't necessarily going to get any better, and despite being able to get him on loan, his wages are around 300k a week, which you're still going to have to pay a good chunk of that in order for Bayern Munich to actually let him leave. He also has the dreaded injury problem. He's had consistent injury problems for the last few years now, which have limited his game time, and he's never played over 2,000 minutes in a league season, and the last 3 years he's played 1,100, 1,400 and 1,300, which I would say is not enough even for a backup option. So ultimately I'm giving this a 3 out of 10 if Arsenal were to sign him. Now the next player in this category is a little bit of a cop-out because he probably wouldn't be the cheapest, but it's Donyell Malen from Borussia Dortmund. Now Malen was on Arsenal's books as an academy player, but eventually left to PSV in the Netherlands and has done well at Dortmund last season, scoring 15 goals in all competitions and 13 in the league. Now at 25 years old, he definitely has room to grow still, but he's probably going to be the player you see now, and he is very versatile, being able to play on the right wing, the left wing and centre forward like he did at PSV. These consistent transitions have seen him get a lot of goals and a lot of assists. He's got a lot of assists for Dortmund, around 19 with 34 goals. So he's very good at link-up play with other players, and specifically he loves running off players as well, doing little 1-2s and running into the box. Now, despite him being able to play on both wings, I think he's actually more suited to the right wing position because he's really good at that old Thierry Henry shot where he puts it across the goalkeeper. It's something that he's been proven that he's very good at. Most of his goals last year came from that way. Now, there's definitely question marks on the price that it would cost to get him in because I think Dortmund would still want a lot for him. He's very important for their side. And there's also question marks about actually is he going to consistently be this good? And what I mean by that is that his XG in every season that he's played at a top level has been around about the goals that he scored. Even when he scored 19 in the Eredivisie and got 8 assists, his expected goals and assists were actually around that mark. However, last season he got around a 9 XG and a 3 XG assist, and he actually got 13 goals and 1 assist, so he was down on the assist but 3.5 goals above what he should have got. And this is the only year he ever got that. In the other years he scored 9 and got an XG of 9 as well, and 5 to 4, and it took him a long time to really get acclimatized with the situation at Dortmund, and arguably he had his best season last year when as a team they had their worst year, coming 5th in the league. But he was prolific last season. He scored a lot of goals and was still very important, and he's very fast. He's very good on that transition, which could help Arsenal. We've said that we needed, and can get in behind players, and he's very clinical in 1v1 situations, which he probably would be one of the best finishers within the team. Now, despite his link-up play being pretty decent and he's okay at going around players, realistically his stats do not compare to a lot of wingers and attacking midfielders in Europe, other than his goal scoring stats overall. He's getting around 4 shots per 90. Non-penalty expected goals are a 0.5 from the last year, which puts him in the top 1 and top 2% of players in his position in Europe. So he is a very clinical output player and will get goals, very much like a Leandro Trossard. Now, if he's basically Leandro Trossard on the right side, you don't really want to be spending 35-40 mil on him, so he could be a little bit too expensive for this project right now. But I do think there is talent with Marlon, and he's a player that I do like quite a lot. Overall, if Arsenal were to sign him, I'd say it's probably about a 5 out of 10 because I do think he can offer more than Coman, who we spoke about before. And the last cheap option that we're going to look at in this category is actually from the same club, being Karim Adeyemi. Now, originally I was not going to talk about Adeyemi because it looked like he was going to go to Juventus, but that deal fell through a few weeks ago, which means that Dortmund are willing to sell him and he could be available for a cheaper deal. Now, Adeyemi, in my opinion, has a lot of potential to be a player like we have spoken about with Marlon, being really quick on transition and being very physical, winning the ball and getting in behind and being clinical in their 1v1 situations. However, I think there's a bit more overall to Adeyemi's game than Marlon. He's a very physical player and loves making decent tackle and interception numbers, which I think could be even good when you want to get on the break and win the ball up from higher up the pitch. And he's a player that clearly works very hard because he has really good ball recoveries, but he's also a decent carrier into the penalty area just from outside it and can make the right decisions occasionally, but that's something that is definitely needs to improve with him on that side. He's also someone that does win a lot of his duels and is quite good in the air actually, even though he's only reported around 5'11" tall, so he's not the tallest, but he does a lot what he can. And with the Juventus bid reportedly being around 35 million euros, and the fact that I know that the Sahin's just come in and apparently he really likes him and trusts him, I think they are running out of time for him at that team. He hasn't had a great output in a few years that he's been there, and we've seen glimpses of what he can produce, like that brilliant goal against Chelsea in the Champions League a few years ago, and I think that could be a good project for Arteta to come in for a cheaper deal maybe later on in the market, because I do think he has significant potential and he is versatile, being able to play on both wings again and centre forward. But I think you would rather put him out on the left wing where he could back up Saka on the right but also be a starter on the left, although there is similarities to Martinelli and how he plays. Now, I know Arteta has tried some ballsy winger projects before, like even the Mudryk one, you've got to say, even though we didn't get him in, but I don't think Arsenal would probably sign any of these players because I don't think that they would want to go for these unless we get really desperate near the end of the market, but they're always going to be there as a chance. Overall, I think I give Adeyemi maybe a 5 out of 10 as well, as I think he is very similar to Marlon but doesn't have that necessarily output there, but has a lot of other parts of his game which maybe are better than Marlon overall. Now finally, we are moving into market opportunities. These are players that could be on a range of prices but ultimately will be less money right now than they would have been last season or maybe in a season's time, depending on their situation and their club situation overall. Obviously, we've seen Arsenal going for Marino, who was a market opportunity in some sense, and you can argue Calafiori was because he's on a cheaper deal being from Bologna. Now the first person we're going to go through is Raheem Sterling. Now it's been reported that he has been thrown out like many of the Chelsea players such as Chilwell as well, and he's not training with the first team, not being considered by the team anymore, and that is going to be it. Now we reportedly went in for Sterling when he went to Chelsea, but we weren't necessarily concrete on signing him, and he got convinced by Chelsea anyway. Now I'm sure many of you watching will know who Sterling is and know what he brings to a team, but he is very much a good output player. He has scored a lot of goals in the Premier League, and even last season scored 8 goals and got 4 assists, and he wasn't exactly that good, but that is a problem. He hasn't been that good since he's been at Chelsea in the last 2 years, and he's really good at bringing the ball from deep like many of these wingers that we're going to go through are. He's good at take-ons, going past players, and he's good, more importantly, at making good runs into the box, which may Arsenal sometimes probably need, at least before this season started. Now the good things about him is obviously he is Premier League experienced, has played a lot of minutes in the Prem, scored a lot of goals, and does know Mikel Arteta. They have worked with each other before, obviously at Manchester City. He's also a bit of a different winger than some of the ones that we have. He's someone that doesn't really want the ball all the time and sort of stays off it to make them back post runs, which could be good for us but also could be bad because we need a little bit more build-up play from our wingers, especially with the triangles that we've been doing recently. And although Chelsea are willing to get rid of him, will they be willing to get rid of him to us? I think probably they would at this point, but they'll still want a little bit of money, and he's on a lot of wages. His wages are crazy, over 300k a week nearly, so will we want to pay anywhere near that? And I don't think we would, but I do think given his stature he is probably a market opportunity, but at 29 I wouldn't sign him myself. I'd probably give it another 3 out of 10 for this signing. Now finally getting into a more exciting player is Raphinha from Barcelona. As the player has been linked with Arsenal for many years now. He was linked with us of course before he went to Barcelona from Leeds United, where we wanted him reportedly, and in Barcelona his time has definitely not necessarily been the best, but also I think he's been better than a lot of Barca fans give him credit for, but these things sort of happen within Spanish football. Now he's a market opportunity in my opinion because there is reports obviously Barca are selling random players to try and get other players in, and although it doesn't look like they're going to get Nico Williams, they could try and sign another winger or just get Raphinha out, as we have seen them get out Gundogan and other players as well. First and foremost, Raphinha is Premier League experience where he was at Leeds, and I think he was a very good player at that side, and he is overall a very creative and a great attacking outfit. In the last 3 or 4 seasons he has been very good at getting good goals and good assists, getting around 15 to 14 goals and assists every year, and having a good XG up about them numbers, so he is creating a lot and scored a lot as well. Also last season in his selected minutes where he played less than 2,000 he got 10 goals and 13 assists, which is a brilliant output, and he has proven that he can do it on the best days, being able to play in right wing and left wing easily with no change at all. He's also works really hard, he's a brilliant presser, he's really got some encouraging defensive stats which could even get better at Arsenal, and he's not the best passer per se, but when you're a great presser and you're very clinical in front of goal, he could be like a Trossard but even better within the team, where he could definitely come in for Saka or come in for Martinelli on either wing. And everyone goes on about it, he's one of them players that can create moments in just a second. He can score a worldie out of nowhere and carry teams through in transition, and more importantly in their moments that Arsenal need that really attacking force to just turn up when they need it to. We can't keep relying on Saka. I think out of any wingers on the market, Raphinha is actually probably the closest to Saka, and he can play on the left wing as well. So if you can get a good market opportunity, if you can get him for less than 50 million, I think it would be a good signing, despite him nearly being 28 and still being on unfortunately 200k a week, which is definitely a big con to this whole deal. I think overall Raphinha would be like an 8 out of 10 signing for Arsenal, depending of course on the wages and the price you can get him for, but potentially could get a loan with maybe an option to buy in there, because Barcelona are a weird team. And I kind of do think this guy will be up on the high radars of the forwards that we're looking at, because I know Arteta loves him and has been looking at him for years. Another player that Arsenal could potentially sign as a market opportunity is of course Leroy Sane, another player from Bayern Munich. Now we've already gone through the Bayern Munich situation with the Coman deal, but it's kind of the same with Sane, them needing to get out a winger and these two being the ones that have been reportedly up for sale. Now Sane is a completely different player to Coman, and in my opinion a way better player as well. He has a completely better output, he's got a way better ball striking ability, and has got a brilliant movement to get past players. He's also not as injured as much and has played over 2,000 minutes 4 times in his career, compared to Coman's 0. And even last season, he scored 8 goals and got 11 assists, and most of that was in the first half of the season. But even against us, I thought he was quite good in that first leg specifically. He's a great ball carrier from deep, he's a great dribbler, he's really good at going past players, he's a good passer, he does link up play well, and he's not going to do much defensive work, so he could be that transitional threat that you need. But ultimately, for a player that I don't think is going to start every single game for Arsenal, which is kind of what I'm looking at with some of these, I think it would be a very good signing if the right deal can be struck. Of course, I think they still want to keep him. He is 28 years old, which we don't see Arsenal spend a huge amount of money on, and he is on over 350k a week, which is astronomical wages that I don't think he'll want to go too down on, and I don't think we'll want to pay too much for that age of a player. Overall, the finances on this deal probably would concern me, but I think that he is an incredible player that can improve Arsenal and could definitely get into this side, but I don't think it's very likely. It's going to cost a lot, I think, now, because Bayern Munich missed out on Desir Douar, who I would have put on this list as well, but unfortunately he's gone to PSG. So I do think that it probably is a 7 out of 10 because he's still a good player, but the finances may a little bit be out of our reach. Now, a potential interesting player that has come up recently is Simon Adingra from Brighton. Now, Adingra has become very well known in the Premier League over the last year, and I actually thought he was very good last season. He seems like a very clinical striker. He gets in the right areas, and he's very dribble heavy. He's really good at going around players and using his trickery to do it. But he also works incredibly hard and has incredible defensive stats for a winger. We're talking almost Saka levels, which you just don't see if wingers do usually. Now, this does mean a lot of his attacking stats are down. He doesn't create the most and have the most shots per 90, but he's another one of these really quick wingers that are very good one-on-one that could help Arsenal in transition because they're just so quick going forward, and he's got Premier League experience, and I do think his clinical level is definitely getting better every year. Now, I definitely thought as well there was a deal available for this guy. You could probably get him for around 30 mil, so maybe on the cheaper option, but we know what Brighton are like when they sell players, and although they are spending a lot of money this summer, which makes me feel they're going to be willing to let some of these players go. He came on the first game this season and scored, and I still think he's going to play a big role for them this year, so you could definitely get him out of that team, and I definitely think he's good enough to be a backup for Arsenal behind Saka. He isn't going to be that worldy game changer, but obviously we'll get into them players, but for a cheaper deal, it is a good market opportunity, and he could provide a lot more like Trossard provided, but not actually a lot more build up and a lot more progression play. Now, I think overall it'd be a solid 6 out of 10, and I do think it's probably a realistic sign that Arsenal go and make, whether that is good or bad. Depending on the price, I think I would put it up or down. Now, there's other players we could have gone through, but I didn't really feel like Arsenal were going to bother this summer, so I didn't really think about speaking about them, and that is Brahim Diaz, who is another player we know Arteta likes, can play in midfield and on the wings. And there's obviously brilliant players out there such as Nicolas Gonzalez from Fiorentina, and even Zagrova, who plays for Lille and is very highly rated in Liga 1. These players are very good, some of them projects, some of them could be very good in different ways now, but I can't really see Arsenal making that the move, so I'm not really going to speak about them here. And now moving on from players I don't think Arsenal will look into is players that I don't think Arsenal could get this year. I'm going to quickly go over these because we've been through these all before, but obviously the first one's Alexander Isak. I think he is probably be the main option for striker. I think he was first and Benjamin Sesko was second, but obviously they're not gettable this year. They're going to stay at their respected team due to financial reasons, and the team's not wanting to sell, and we can't really force them to do that. So anyone suggesting him, I think it's very unrealistic to do that. Same with people like Rafael Leao. He has rejected massive clubs like Barcelona, Real Madrid before to stay at AC Milan, and I also think sometimes there could be some problems with the fact he doesn't try and actually defend. But ultimately Arsenal won't be going in for a player like Leao this summer, maybe next summer if things happen and things progress, but it won't happen just yet. And that's the same unfortunately about Mohamed Kudus. This one is probably the one that hurts the most because Kudus was so gettable last year, and I remember wanting him so much. For around the 40 mil mark that they signed him for, I felt like it was a perfect market opportunity. Fortunately West Ham got him, and we've been able to see how good he is in the Premier League, but because he's been there 1 year and he's on a massive contract, I could potentially see him leaving next year. Maybe we'll see what happens with West Ham. They spent a lot of money this summer, but even then I think big teams like Liverpool, even Man City might go in for him, so we've got to see what happens, and I don't think this year is very realistic to be able to poach him. These Premier League teams are hard to buy off quite a lot of the time. I also want to have a quick moment before we get into the players that are really going to change the club to speak about Assane Douai, who obviously is a player who, if you know, he's been getting spoke about a lot. He's got release clause around 26 mil, and he's a winger that plays for Real Betis, who's been really impressing out in La Liga. Now this guy has brilliant defensive numbers. He is everywhere. He really works hard. I think there's obviously going to be some output issues, but he's so young. He's only 18 years of age, so that is to be expected. But he's 230, he's very fast, and he does have good ball striking abilities, which you can definitely see in his potential. So he could be a sign for the future, and for 26 mil could definitely be done, but I can't see Arsenal making that right now because we need someone that's going to come in and be able to change the game. And I don't think we specifically have 26 mil just lying around this summer, especially if we are to sign a goalkeeper. But he is definitely a player to keep your eye on. Now we're going to obviously go into the big part of the video, the big transfers that I think realistically Arsenal could sign if they go knocking for these players, but not necessarily all of them are completely realistic depending on the situation that they're in. They're all going to cost a lot of money as well, upwards of 50 mil I would have to say. Some of them may be on the lower side of that, some may be on the higher. I do think if Arsenal are very serious about this league title this year, they should consider signing one of these players and probably should make it happen. Now first we're going to quickly go through it. Nico Williams of course is probably the best shout for anyone out there. He is so good. We've all seen him. I've done multiple videos on him if you want to go and watch them to get more of an idea. High dribble numbers, brilliant against one-on-one, creates loads, got a great decision making in the box, super young at 22. Obviously he's got very high wages, we all know that. 50 mil release clause, which is definitely buyable, and I think realistically Arsenal could potentially get him. I don't think it's very likely because he's rejected teams like Barca, which make a lot more sense, but he is definitely the dream player, which there's a slight chance that Arsenal could get him, so we'll have to look into that. But even if Arsenal sort of broke their wage structure, I actually think it's a 9 or 10 out of 10 sign, and this guy is probably the best option out there, but maybe not gettable right now. And next is a player that is very much like that. It's Victor Gyokeres, another player we've gone through a load, so I'm not going to speak about him too much. Watch my latest video where I went through a few weeks ago about how good he would be. But in my opinion, he'd probably be the best shout for at least a striker. He can still facilitate on the wing positions, especially the left, because he loves drifting out to that left side when he's in attack. But a big guy, over 6 foot, very physical, very good at link-up play, gets loads of assists, loads of goals, already got loads of goals this season. Obviously, question marks around if he could do that in the Premier League is completely valid, and the price it would cost to get him in maybe around 70-80 mil, which you don't really see Arsenal do deals for unless they're completely sure. But I do think he's a player that could definitely suit the team with how good he is with building up the play. But obviously, it's a player we've gone through loads, so I'm going to give it probably about 7 out of 10 depending on the price. If you can get it for less than 60 mil, then I'd probably put it up to 8. But people don't seem to realize that if you get Gyokeres in now, it does limit you being able to get Isak in next year, or even someone like Sesko, who I think would be a better option long term. So you know, you've got to be careful with these sort of deals. Next, I want to talk about a player that I didn't really think I would have to talk about, and that's Ademola Lookman from Atalanta. Now Lookman has played in the Premier League obviously before. We all know he's been at teams such as Everton, Leicester and Fulham, and I think reasonably at Fulham and Leicester he did look quite good at the time there. However, he's gone to Atalanta for about £15 million a few years ago, and obviously been amazing in the Serie A. He suits that league perfectly. He's a very direct player. He loves pretty much doing anything that would require to get near to the goal. He's got good link-up play, good 1-2s, and loves running off it. He can run in behind. He makes good runs into the box and can score from his head as well as his feet. He can play in left wing, can play in attacking midfield, and can play in centre forward, but hasn't been used in right wing in the last few years. Now this is definitely coming after the brilliant last season he had with 17 goals and 10 assists in all competitions, and of course he's got that brilliant hat-trick in the Europa League final to win them that trophy. And it is reported that Arsenal are in for this guy, with Liverpool also looking as well, with a potential €50 million bid on the cards with a Kivior deal, because we know Italian teams will love Kivior and he suits football there, so that kind of makes sense to me. Now this is a very expensive transfer that has kind of come out of nowhere with these leaks, and I think he could offer a bit of directness, bit of counter-attack, and he's very quick that Arsenal don't really have before. But considering how much he's going to cost, I'm not sure Arsenal would necessarily want to do that, but maybe that is a good solution to get Kivior to leave. And he is Premier League experienced, and he does offer things differently. Just looking at his stats, they are excellent. He has lots of shot creating actions, lots of assists, lots of goals, while also being very encouraging at just being a proper winger, taking people on. And he's not an overall pass heavy guy, so I don't think he'd want to start for Arsenal or understand that he can't start every game. But it maybe is that different platform of players that Arsenal need, especially as a winger, because he plays a little bit more like Jesus when he plays, and sometimes that may be good to have another player like that. Overall, this is a weird sign to me. I don't really know what to make of it. I'm going to give it maybe a 7 out of 10. Obviously, the price is very expensive for someone who I never really considered to play for Arsenal. Let me know in the comments what you think about this one specifically. Next, we're going to talk about bakayoko. Now, a player I have briefly spoke about before, but it's someone that has been getting more and more hype around him, and more Arsenal fans are starting to want him at the club, and I honestly think he'd be a really good player. He's only 21 years of age. He's a very physical winger. This guy is very strong. He does like beefing the defenders and having a great dribbling battle. And he's one of the best dribblers out there. He's one of the best take-ons out there. Has such high levels of picking the ball up and running past players. 7 carries per 90, which is incredible. And just creates so much. Of course, it's the Eredivisie, and sometimes that doesn't translate well to the Premier League. But he is having some of the highest creative numbers in that league. Sort of the numbers that people like Gakpo were having, and have come over and been reasonably okay, especially when it comes to finishing. And he's young enough where you can develop him into a better player if he stays on the bench or came into the team sporadically. I think he would be a great signing for Arsenal. He would cost probably a lot of money, I reckon, around 50 mil, I reckon, because PSV definitely like this guy a lot more than some of the players that have been there before, because his underlying stats are very encouraging as well. He does overperform expected goals and expected assists in his last 2 years, his main 2 years he's playing a professional, and that could be definitely down to the league as well. Also, maybe a clinical player, you've got to consider these things, but he's just the sort of Doku type of winger where he just go past players and do things one-on-one. And now I know Doku's not got that end product that is frustrating for City, but sometimes he can just bring you into the game and go past players and dominate a fullback, which causes many good things for the team. And I think he can develop, and Arteta can use him as a project while him still having a good level now, where he could be quite exciting player. He's also very quick, can be very good on that transition, which is very important for Arsenal. I think, of course, everything's dependent on the deal. I've said that a few times now. I think overall this could be an 8 out of 10 signing. I think he could be really good for Arsenal and could give you good backup on the right side, but also could potentially start on the left side as well. He's very versatile. Now, next is going to be a little bit of a rogue shout, especially in this category, and that is Takefusa Kubo. Now, if you don't know, this guy is 23 years old and he plays for Real Sociedad, obviously the team that we have just agreed to deal Mourinho from. And apparently in their Mourinho discussions, there was also discussions about Kubo potentially joining Arsenal in the future. Now, he's a versatile forward as well. He can play attacking midfield, can play both wings, and can potentially play up front, but I don't think he'd do that in the Premier League. And he's not necessarily a very big player. He's on the smaller side, but he's a very dribble heavy, very good, tricky player going past players. He's another one of these wingers that is really good at picking the ball up and carrying it far, a bit like a Jack Grealish type, gets it into the box and often does a lot of pullbacks and good area play where he can try and help the team. Now, overall, I don't think Kubo probably would cost 50 mil, so he probably shouldn't be in this category, but Real Sociedad do have quite a big release clause on him, and he's got 50% of his rights are still at Real Madrid because it's kind of complicated in Spain. But I do think there's significant potential with this guy, definitely to be that player that can push into the side later on. I don't think right now, if you put him in Arsenal's team, he'd be able to start every week, but under the leadership of our team and the players around him, I think he definitely could get better. He creates a lot of shot creating actions per 90, which is definitely an encouraging fact, and he's not necessarily got high goal scoring stats or assist stats, only getting around 7 goals and 3 assists last season, but he's one of them players that you can tell has one season away from just exploding into a brilliant player. He's been developing for many years now in the Liga for many teams, and he's a player that is very good at crossing, which is another thing that we obviously look at. Great at bringing the ball forward, which you mentioned, and could be that impact sub who's very quick as well, who can come on later on in games. He isn't necessarily as physical right now, which I think could be a worry in the Premier League, and the price it probably costs, again, 40-45 mil, maybe even more, is not necessarily that encouraging, especially considering Arsenal want that big winger who's going to save them in the future. But I do think he could be a somewhat project signing that could be good now, and he's only on £40,000 a week, which means that you could get him on maybe a cheaper wage deal. Overall, I don't think it's a signing Arsenal will make, but they could potentially if they're looking for an outside shout, and I think he would probably be a 6 out of 10 signing. I think in other summers it'd probably be higher, but considering what Arsenal need right now, it's probably not the best to go for him. Now, even though he's not really an out-and-out winger or a forward per se, he's not really a striker, Eberechi Eze can definitely play him wing and definitely is considered a forward because he is a 10. I've refrained from going into many other 10s because Arsenal haven't really looked at them, and Eze's been the only one that's been sort of linked. but I actually think most of the heat around Eze has cooled off, at least for now. Maybe something can ignite again at the end of the transfer window. Now, Eze is a completely brilliant player. He's so creative. He gets into them spaces and drives with the ball. Also got great dribbling level, being able to go past players quite easily. And he can bring people into the game a lot, definitely getting the best out of strikers. He's another player that's brilliant on transition, which Arsenal need a little bit more. But in Arsenal's possession-based team, it may struggle a little bit where he has to have the ball a lot more than he probably would at Palace. I think Eze's a brilliant player. I just don't think he's what Arsenal need right now. And I think we are moving more into a winger market, which I think is probably the best option, unless you can obviously get like a gyokeres or maybe someone else for bringing up in a little bit up front. And Eze, for the price you're going to have to get him for, considering Crystal Palace's sell record this summer, probably be too hard. I think if we got him, it'd be a 7 out of 10 signing before the price and the deal overall, and considering we need to make other players join, probably about a 5 out of 10 for me this time. Lastly, the player that Arsenal could definitely sign, I think it's definitely possible, is Victor Osimhen. Now, reportedly, I've put this last because Arsenal have opened talks with him again, potentially maybe on a £190 million deal, which I think is a lot of money for Osimhen. Obviously, we've spoke about him a few times before. Injury record, not great. Is a very physical beast and can help you on transition. He's very aggressive, very high presser, does actually try his best. Ultimately, he's not the most clinical player in the world, but he's clinical enough, I think, that any of our players right now got a good striking ability, and he is that maybe sort of leader that we need up front. Apparently, though, they're not necessarily happy with how he conducts himself sometimes, and I do think he could be a bit of an ego character, which we don't really get in our team right now. Now, we've gone through Osimhen before, and obviously there is major concerns with him, so watch my other videos if you want me to go into it a little bit more detail. But I do think there's definitely a deal to be looked at there, which I think Arsenal are looking at, because a lot of teams aren't going in for him. You could definitely maybe get that price down a little bit, maybe get them wages down a little bit. I don't maybe think that would be that as easy. And if you can get a deal for around 60 to 70 mil, I think it is really doable. He's a good age, he has a lot to learn but can improve the team, and he's massive. Like, I think that's the main thing. He's over 6 foot, guy in the air, very good in the air as well, which is something that we've clearly been focusing on this year. I think if it is around 70 mil or maybe less, I think to me it's a 9 or a 10 out of 10 signing. I think if it's a bit more than that, if it's 90 to 100 mil we're looking at, I think it's got to be down to about 7 or 8 maybe, but I still think it'd be a good signing, and he is a very good player. Maybe not the right fit for us, but obviously Arsenal will make their decision in due course. Now, this has been a long video where we've gone through a lot of different players, and there's obviously players we've missed out as well, like Kvaratskhelia is a player I'd love Arsenal to sign, but I don't think it's realistic, and I had to cut it down somewhere. And of course there's hundreds of other players that I think probably be a good fit or not, but I think Arsenal are more likely to sign one of the players that I've gone through today than anyone that I haven't mentioned, but obviously we will see. If you stuck around to the end, I really do appreciate it. It's a long video, especially for my channel. If you like this video, please like and subscribe, and let me know if you like these sort of longer videos where I break down different players and different profiles. Hopefully Arsenal sign a forward. That's all I can say, and see you in the next one.